Greenhouse gases are linked to increased global warming and climate change. Despite reduction efforts, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change reported in Berlin last week the amount of greenhouse gases released into the atmosphere increased faster in one decade than it did in the last 30 years. My guest, UC San Diego professor David Victor, is an author on that report and the author of the book Global Warming Gridlock. David, welcome back.
Oh, thank you.
A panel set up by the United Nations to advise governments on climate change did this report. What were the biggest takeaways for you?
I think the most important message is that lots of governments are now adopting policies, but when you add them up, the impact on emissions is barely evident. Emissions are now rising rapidly. The climate change problem is getting worse, and if we're going to stop global warming at 2 degrees or some level like that, we're going to need a complete overhaul of the policy strategy.
And that was sort of the takeaway of it. The EPA also released a report last week that said U.S. greenhouse gases emissions dropped by about 3.5% in 2012 from the year before. Now, I know this is a different time frame, but I'm wondering, it seems like that's a step in the right direction, but that's not enough.
It's a step in the right direction, but a big part of the U.S. drop in emissions is luck. We were lucky enough to find shale gas, and shale gas is now is driven the price of natural gas down. That's allowed natural gas, which has lower emissions than coal, to compete in generating electricity. And so U.S. emissions are lower as a result of that. But a serious policy strategy on climate change needs a lot more than luck.
Right. How does the U.S. compare as far as so we got lucky with that. I'm curious as how we compare to other nations, though, in actually trying to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions.
The U.S. is making an effort. It's not as much of an effort as the European countries. Climate change is really a motivating force for policy in Europe right now, not the way it is here in the United States, but we're doing some things, and some states in the United States are doing more than others. California is a great example. Overall, U.S. emissions are the second largest in the world.
Behind China.
Behind China. China's the largest emitter, and coming up with a strategy that brings China, the United States, other big emitters into an international treaty on climate change, that's very, very difficult to do, and that helps explain why we've been talking about climate change for a long time but not actually making very much progress.
Well, you were talking about the European nations. I understand some have a carbon tax, and that's not happening here. So what are they doing? Is that the only thing they're doing, or are there other things we can learn from them?
A couple have a carbon tax. All the European countries together are part of an emissions trading scheme, which is called a cap and trade system, where you trade the right to pollute, in effect, similar to what we have here in California and some other states in the United States. Most countries so far have made reductions in emissions through these market instruments, but mainly through regulation, efficiency standards, requirements to switch fuels, requirements to put more renewable energy into the electric power system. When you add all that up, the impact of direct regulation has actually been greater than these market strategies.
What do you think the U.S. is getting right? Are we getting anything right besides luck on finding our shale gas?
We're doing a little bit. Our policies on energy efficiency have made a big dent in U.S. emissions. U.S. gasoline consumption is now declining year on year because of those energy efficiency policies. So that's something we're doing right. California's cap and trade system, which is a market-based system, that's right. Hopefully that'll spread out to the rest of the country. So we're getting a few things right. I think we're also trying to negotiate with other countries so that the United States, China, and other big emitters have some kind of a collective strategy in this area. But those are still baby steps. And the Obama administration wants to do more. They're hamstrung in Congress. It's a kind of grim political situation.
When I ask, the majority of people acknowledge climate change. So what is it going to take from acknowledging that there's a problem to actually doing something about it?
I think that's a very interesting result in the polling data. People increasingly acknowledge climate change is caused by humans, and yet they're still not willing to do very much about it. What needs to happen is we need to be willing to pay the extra cost. And one of the main findings from this report is that we have the strategies at hand to start to control emissions, but they're not going to be cheap. They're going to cost on the order of 1 or 2% of global economic output every year by mid-century. That's a lot of money. It's manageable. It's within the realm of what we spend on other important priorities like healthcare, but it's a serious amount of money.
San Onofre, of course, is now shut down. SDG&E is considering gas power plants. What kind of impact do you think that'll have on our area's greenhouse gas emissions?
Almost certainly greenhouse gas emissions will go up because San Onofre's emissions were essentially zero. Nuclear power is one of the major options, not the only. There are a lot of options for controlling emissions. Gas, which is the cheapest alternative right now and economically the smartest strategy for replacing that power, has higher emissions than nuclear, so emissions will go up.
We will see it a lot more on our website, kpbs.org. Professor David Victor, thank you.
Oh, thank you.